What does it take to build a mind that doesn't just react to its environment, but actually responds in a way that's constructive and not destructive?
It's not about turning your brain off. It's about putting order to the chaos.
Our bodies is this adaptation machine that
Right.
adapts to so much that it's exposed to. And stress can be one of those things that you can learn to adapt to and respond to better.
Every female, if you want out of that position, you deserve the ability to get out.
Welcome back to the 90% Healthy Podcast. Hey, Don, how's it going?
Good, Klaudia. How are you today?
I am doing well. It's been an exciting couple of weeks. Lots are on the plate, and so many news are coming out in terms of different ways of optimizing various aspects of our health. So I love that we dive into whatever's current
Yeah.
so our audience can get a snapshot of what's happening, what's bullshit, what's actually worth their time and effort. And today we're going to talk about mental resilience and how to build it and boost it, which is something that I think has become a lifelong learning opportunity for me because I'm working on mastering it, but it's a practice that I constantly have to improve upon. And I'm glad that we're going to dive into some modalities, some practices, and supplements that can help you boost that mental resilience. But what do you think? Where is your mental resilience stands?
Well, I'll tell you what's interesting about this is just a little bit about me. Back in the day when I was a college athlete and wrestling, I struggled with anxiety. So my junior year, I was like 6-12. Of the 12 matches I lost, I got pinned because I couldn't get off the bottom wrestling. So I went to a camp that summer, became unrideable, and I go from 6-12 to 39-9, ranked nationally, doing really good. But of the 9 losses, 7 of them took place in our home arena. I couldn't lose on the road and I couldn't win at home, and it was crazy. And so I started working with a sports psychologist that summer, and I didn't know what was funny is, probably, I don't know, it's been 5 or 10 years ago, we were working with a counselor at one of the companies I was with, and they were talking about mental visualization and what's going on. I'm like, that's what I was doing back then. That's what they taught me to do back then. But we're going to talk today about this word stress. It's a funny word, and I think that we're going to bring a lot to it. You know what? I've got the advantage of having been through some tough stuff and developed some skills that we'll talk about today, but hopefully we can pass some things on to our audience.
I couldn't agree more. And I have some stories in my pocket too that I want to pull out occasionally that kind of helps the listener relate to perhaps a part of their life where they don't know how to get started on boosting their mental resilience. What does it take to
Mhm.
build a mind that doesn't just react to its environment, but actually responds in a way that's constructive and not destructive?
That's great. That's a great, very concise. I love the way you put that.
Thank you. So I wanted to jump into, we wrote down this hook that I wanted to pull in our audience with is that we're facing stress more than ever, yet we're not always sure whether something is a good stress or a bad stress because there are conversations out there that stress is good to an extent, but you don't want to have too much because that can become chronic and then that can take a toll on your nervous system and immune system and overall health and resilience. Now, are we supposed to avoid stress altogether? Probably not. But how can we make our brain stronger in handling it?
Yeah, you can't avoid it. Okay, that things come at you, okay, in life. Now, and as you were saying, I'm thinking, do we have more stress today than we ever have? I don't know. When you look at stress, the ability to pay your
Different.
bills, yeah, there's no doubt that our electronics and have added a new layer to what we have to deal with, but the word stress is a funny word because as I work on a podcast like this, or if I work with another company talking about HRV, stress, there's eustress and there's distress. Eustress is positive stress, distress is stress. And you know what? You turned me on to a great book in our last conversation called was it Buy Your Time Back, or was it
Buy back your time.
Buy Back Your Time? And in Buy Back Your Time, they talk about, and actually he talks about another book called Atomic Habits by Clear. And we had a long drive this weekend. We went down to Pittsburgh to watch my daughter coach. And listened to a lot of both of those books, and they used a term that really registered with me: making chaos predictable. And as I've been thinking about that, and I've been working on this, I think distress is chaos. I think when things are happening and you're not sure, to a degree. As an athlete, I'll tell you the other book that I read back then that I think is the most important book I've ever read. It's called Flow: The Psychology of the Optimum Experience by Mihai Csikszentmihalyi. And when you're in flow, you're in the groove. It's this wonderful space that we're in where the chemicals in our brain are optimized, and we all strive for this. Whether you're an athlete or a musician or an actor or a dancer or anybody, we want to be in that perfect spot. Now, part of the challenge is that it's difficult. So there's 7 characteristics of the flow experience. Challenging activity requires skill, emerging of action and awareness, clear goals and feedback, concentration on the task at hand. There's a transformation of time, loss of self. But there tends to be a challenge necessary, and that challenge can be a little chaotic. So you can get a little sympathetic fight or flight response, but when you pair that with a lot of parasympathetic, man, that's when flow turns on. And so listen, when I get on my exercise bike or when I pick up a kettlebell, that is stress. That is a eustress. Okay. When I get a letter in my inbox from the IRS, that is distress. And so one leads to a positive response, the other leads to a negative response. So as we talk about stress, let's think about this, whether it's chaos or predictable, whether we have the resources to deal with it or not. This is what, and I think this winds up being the paradigm that we work in. What do you think?
I agree, and I like how you even just pulling stress apart into the good stress, the eustress, and the bad stress, the distress, and then referring to distress as a chaos and not just stress in itself as the chaos, because stress can have different implications. And I do have to give credit to my brother because he's the one who got me on that Buy Back Your Time book. And it literally was such an easy listen. And I was like, oh, I can implement this. I can implement this. And I can have more
Yes.
time and I can have more energy. And this is great. But going back to the use stress and distress, that hormetic stress, that good stress that we experience when we put ourselves into a stressful situation like working out. We put our body through a stress, not so it can be destroyed, but so it can become stronger. So when you lift, and I think we talked about it in the past, when you do a bicep curl, your body is adapting. So when you do a bicep curl heavier next time, it can handle it better.
Hmm.
So it becomes stronger for the future. So it becomes more predictable. Okay, I can take on whatever chaos can be happening in the future because I have experienced it in the past and I have adapted. I mean, our bodies is this adaptation machine that adapts to so much that it's exposed to. And stress can be one of those things that you can learn to adapt to and respond to better.
Yeah, and early on when we were exchanging notes as we're preparing for this episode, we were talking about stress and relaxation. And that's what kind of triggered me when I was going through this, because I don't think of relaxation. I don't I don't go to a spa. You know what? While I recommend massage on a regular basis, I've only gotten a massage one time. It's not something it's not something I seek out. It's not something I really want. Now, I got massage when I was having a muscle spasm and I needed someone to work that out, but I like to think of the right amount of stress and recovery as developing resilience, developing the tools and the resources necessary to match up to the next challenge that comes along. And that is, having the resiliency, having the resources to deal with the chaos. And I think it's another way to look at this. You know what? I was trying to think, do I relax? I don't know that I mindfully ever do that. Now, I'll tell you
Do
what,
you meditate?
I meditate. I absolutely do meditation, but I do it to build resources. It's training for me. I think of relaxation as doing nothing, going to a place and just shutting down. I don't do that. I don't do that. When I finally get to sleep, that's probably it. But I constantly do things to build resources, to build resilience so that I have the capability to deal with the next challenge that comes along.
I am totally with you on the being bad at relaxation, and I have to say I'm pretty sure I'm getting it from my mom. 'Cause I'm really bad at just sitting down and not doing anything. Like, I constantly see, "Oh, this can be done. Maybe I can, mop the floor, do a little cleaning, do this, do that, go out for a walk, and do something." And I'm like and the other week or other month when I was visiting my mom, and she got home from work, she had an evening of nothing that she had to do, and I was there. She's like, "Oh, finally I can relax." And you know what relaxation was? It cracked me up. She was she had collected a bunch of shells from the beach she lives in Florida, and she wanted to wash them out and boil them and then organize them and then wash them through bleach and all those things. I'm like, Mom, is this how you relax?
Yeah, she was making order out of chaos. That's
Yes.
what she was doing. She had this bag or bowl or whatever of shells that she
A
wanted
bucket.
to get ordered. She wanted to get them, and there was a process. So, yeah, that's again, so I don't the term relaxation, I think, can be challenging sometimes. And that's the reason, I threw this out that, listen, the book was perfect. The timing on the book recommendation was absolutely, and I've already used that in two other presentations, by the way,
I love it.
because I think it's so important. So, let's talk about today. Let's talk about how we can make order out of chaos, build resiliency, lower fear. I think a lot of time when we're in chaos, it can cause a fear response. As an athlete, when I would walk onto the mat against another wrestler, I didn't know what he was going to do. That there could be a level of chaos there. But I had built up the resiliency and built up the resources, number one, to deal with his attack. But number two is I had created my own program. What I learned is that when I stopped competing and started performing, and my opponent was just a tool in my performance, my career changed. My life changed. I enjoyed my last year of wrestling as more than the 12 years before combined because I was performing, much like you as a dancer. That other person was just a tool in my performance. And so the mindset that we look at this can be so important.
And to kind of piggyback on that, I wanted to summarize some of the things that we want to talk about today in terms of how you build up resilience, how you build up the strength and the order that you can reach to or when you have chaos in your life and how to respond to that. And one of those things then, and we want to reference a few studies, is combat sports and just practicing some type of physical activity and relaxation techniques. Even now there's studies showing, although there are limitations, which I do want to point out in terms of
Mhm.
creatine having a very good promise for cognitive health. And I wanted to kick off with how much physical activity helps with mental resilience. A lot of people use going to the gym or going out in the nature to hike or do some type of physical activity because it helps their mind be at flow, at more balance. And it was very interesting. Recently, I did a story on whether massages are a must have or a nice to have for athletes. And it does turn out that it is more of a must have than a nice to have,
I agree.
especially if you are very much pushing for performance. And I interviewed this massage therapist who's worked with professional bodybuilders like Kai Green, Jay Cutler. So these big guys who, and also some other professional athletes. And he was telling me that oftentimes it's not only that the massage helps put them in that parasympathetic state, it helps boost that parasympathetic drive, but also if they are injured or they have a limitation, so they cannot go to the gym, they cannot work out, they cannot train in a way that they're used to, it impacts their mental health. It
Mhm.
impacts, he sees it impacts whether it's increased anxiety, signs of depression, the lack of exercise can trigger and give room for these maladaptive cognitive behaviors to rise. And on the flip side, exercise and physical activity can also be a tool that you can use to sort of climb out of that mental struggles that you may be dealing with. And I see it on my own self too. When going to the gym, I feel 100 million times better than I did before.
And thank God for all the chemicals and the neurotransmitters that come with exercise. Just to put you a little bit in the athlete's mindset, we think the harder you work, the better you do. And there's a lot to that. I'm not saying the person who works the hardest is always the winner. And you can, and there's bad work too. So that's what's so important. But when an athlete gets injured, their mind is about, okay, what am I missing? What do I need to do to get back? Things like that. So there's no doubt that you throw a massage in there for someone who's working on this process, it's positive. Let alone the somatic impact of it. Yes, the psychological impact, it's putting order in the chaos. You get that injury, it's chaotic. Okay, how long am I out for? What's it going to take? Am I done? Is my career over? Yada yada yada. So yeah, there's no doubt about that. And as we work through this, the physical and mental, I think there's the thing that really got me when I saw this article is I was thinking of, listen, I am a husband to my wife, a female. I am the father of a daughter. I am a partner with Klaudia on a podcast. I have all kinds of women in my life. I have far more women in my life than I do men. But I'm a combat athlete. It was pretty high level. And I go back to when my daughter, when she was really young, 4 or 5 years old, we pulled out the rec guide from the local rec department and had her pick a sport. There wasn't an option. Pick one. Okay. And I'm thinking we're going to get soccer or something like that. No, she picks wrestling. My daughter picks wrestling. And I thought, oh, geez, here we go. Um, and when you think about it, my office was full of wrestling memorabilia. She had been to probably 30 wrestling matches with me. I see where the interest came from. I didn't have a problem with it. Um, and that's one of the things I wanted to pick out as we talk about this article. The article is called Combat Sports and Wellbeing, Advancing Health and Inclusion in Athletes and Practitioners. It's an opinion paper. But Claudia, I am a huge fan of a martial art called jiu-jitsu. And in jiu-jitsu, there is a technique that's called fighting out of the guard. And the guard in jiu-jitsu is when you're on your back and your opponent is between your legs. That's the guard. It is a very powerful place to be. I personally believe, here's a statement for you. We'll put this in the clips. I believe every female should learn how to fight out of the guard. Okay? I don't care how you got into that position, whether you willingly invited someone into that position, whether you've been put into that position against your will. I don't care how you got there. If you want out of that position, you deserve the ability to get out. If you say no, it's no, and I'm out. And if someone doesn't want to let you out of that position, there are techniques that you can use to either rip their elbow out or choke them out, and you walk away and they're laying there in a pile. So, as I thought about this, making order out of chaos, if you find yourself in that situation, it's going to be very chaotic. How did I get here? How do I get out? What do I do? How does this work? Lots of chaos. If you have some basic jujitsu techniques, you have order. You have the ability, it'll be strenuous, it'll be stressful, it'll be challenging, but you have the ability to order your chaos and not be a victim to it. And so that's what really caught my attention when I saw this paper.
I love that you mentioned there was one word that just I had to write down real fast, which is technique. And
Hmm.
that's what comes down to resilience. Most people don't know what to do, and it's not their fault because most of us don't have the tools, the techniques that we can reach for in order to respond in a way that's constructive, not destructive. So the same with jujitsu, you need to know the technique in order to get out of that chaotic situation.
Know it and practice it. Okay,
and practice it.
there's 2 sides to that. So, anytime that we're talking about meditation, anything that's psychological, somatic, either one, you have to practice this, and it eventually becomes wired in. I mean, you practice it enough, I don't need to practice a single leg or a double leg or a stand-up anymore. I spent 13 years doing that, and it's wired in pretty deep in me. But as we learn these new techniques, it takes time. You've got to practice. I'll tell you the recommendation that I do have is I have a very good friend who was a teammate of mine, Vic Ventresca, who was a jiu-jitsu world champion. And we were up at his wrestling facility, and Jacqueline was young, and I watched he was teaching a little bit. And as Jacqueline went into the guard and Victor was in the dominant position there, I looked in my daughter's eyes and I saw chaos. I'm like, okay, and I'm like, okay, this is not helping her. She's having a fear response here right now. She's not having a learning response. If you are a female, I recommend that you find a jujitsu instructor that's a female. It just creates an environment. Now, do you stay in that? Probably not. You'll learn techniques to move out, but you've got to be in a safe place. You've got to do this from a safe place. And so that was an experience I had. Just wanted to pass it along. If you run a jujitsu facility out there and you don't have females on staff, you should change that. You should get that up because this goes this goes both ways, males and females. So I think that's important. But yes, technique is critical. You can practice it, you can refine it, and it makes order out of chaos.
And I wanted to reference to one of the sections that from that paper that talked about integrating mindfulness techniques into combat sports has an additional benefit to addressing various mental health challenges in a way that's non-pharmacological. That is
Yes.
a tough word, but you guys
In the
know what I mean.
Hungarian translation,
Non-pharmacological. How? Where do you put the emphasis on that syllable?
doesn't make any
Regardless, it is an interesting combination because a lot of people think about combat sports. It's intense, it's going, you're in that alpha brainwave state, you're going and I mean, you're sorry, beta brainwave state, you're very aware and you're
uh-huh.
pushing forward and integrating that with something that slows you down, the mindfulness techniques, the stress management strategies, combining those two, you build such a strong body and mind, and in a way that it's connected, that you are much more equipped to adapt and address a situation that can be stressful. Now, that doesn't have to be a situation where you're being attacked, but it can be a situation where somebody treats you in a way that you don't think is fair. And instead of biting their head off, you respond in a way that's still civil and you become the bigger person.
Yeah, that bandwidth is funny, isn't it? And I go back to again, my experience was that summer I developed meditative techniques. Now, we weren't necessarily doing breathing techniques back here, but they were visualization techniques that we practiced, and I used them to get to sleep at night. Because I had the wicked racing brain back then. Um, I knew what was interesting. So the Ohio State's in a conference called the Big Ten, and it's arguably the best conference in wrestling. And I was working my way through this tournament my last year, and I'm in the finals. I made it to the finals that year. And any other time, I would have been a nervous wreck. Okay. But that year, I learned those techniques, and I went and found a quiet space. It was laying in the bleachers that were pushed in. There's a little slot in the top of the bleachers that I laid down there, and I started practicing my visualization techniques. So there's 10 weight classes in wrestling, heavyweight's obviously the last. I fell asleep slightly after the beginning of the first weight class, and I didn't wake up until the end of the seventh. I woke up, and it was just a natural process. I woke up, did my warm up, and I'm wrestling. So this it's there when when you need it, when you need to focus on it. It's the practice. Had I not practiced that every day for a good solid 300 days before that, I wouldn't have been able to do it. It would have affected the match probably. But yeah, it's about building the resources that so they're there when you need them. And again, whether it's jujitsu or mindfulness meditation or breathing exercises, When I was coaching back at Ohio State, 15 through 18, we were teaching breathing exercises to the team. We taught a 5-second inhalation, exhalation during warm up. So when the team's, kind of walking around the room warming up, we would go through a breathing exercise. And then at the end of practice, when we're cooling down, we would repeat it. And it was so fun. One of my wrestlers is wrestling for a national championship. And we had taught some recovery techniques. And I watched him execute these recovery techniques as he came back from going out of bounds. And we would tell him, I'm like, it's just a little advantage that you get. And at that elite level, those little advantages make a huge difference. But it was so fun to watch someone else do it and so enjoyable and get the benefit from it. So it's about practice. It's about practicing, making it part of the practice. You never become expert, but you always make it part of your practice.
So much to unpack here. I I wanted to preface the fact that studies back all of these findings
Hmm.
because mindfulness and relaxation trainings have been shown to lower perceived stress, anxiety, and depression in students and young adults. And techniques that you talked about, like breath work, progressive muscles, relaxation, and meditation, help the brain recover faster from stressful experiences. And these are techniques that you can use even in day-to-day conversations. Like, I was listening to a podcast and this lawyer was talking to on a Diary of a CEO podcast, and he was saying that if you're in an argument, instead of jumping at that other person for what they may have told you, do a small breathing exercise, which only takes a couple of seconds. When you breathe in, and you breathe in one more time at the top of that breath, and then exhale slowly. That double breath signals to your brain that you're safe and actually activates that parasympathetic response, so you're okay, so you're
Hmm.
not jumping at the person at full force. So you can actually take a second to internalize what was just said and how do I respond in a way that's healthy. And it's not I'm not saying it's easy. These are simple techniques, but they're not really easy to master. I was one of those people who, I'm sure a lot of our listeners may have been before or still are, who say, my mind is constantly racing. I cannot meditate. Meditation is not for me. I don't know how to do it. It's just, I can't shut down my thoughts. It just doesn't work. And I was just like that at age 27 until I went to this yoga and meditation retreat as a journalist, and I thought, oh, yoga and hiking, it sounds really fun. And I'm going to be hiking in the French Alps. I can't wait. And then yoga, I kind of knew something about it. I wasn't a practitioner in a way. I wasn't practicing it. And I didn't really care for the meditation because I thought, whatever. And by day 3, so every day we hiked once a day and had 2 yoga classes, one in the morning that was more of a morning flow, and the evening was more restorative. And on day 3, I had a body work session with one of the practitioners, and I told them, this meditation is just not for me. I don't know how to do it. I can't shut down my brain, and it just doesn't work. And he told me something that has stayed with me ever since, and that one sentence changed the game in meditation for me.
Nice.
He said, you don't have to shut down your thoughts. It's not about turning off your brain. It's about ignoring the thoughts that come in and just staying where you are. And I'm like, okay, I can try that. That evening, I still get goosebumps in it, and how I felt that evening. That evening, they did this sort of body scan meditation, and I was able to sink in the mat and actually meditate for the very first time in my life. And I've never felt so zen. That's the best way to describe it. And after the meditation or that yoga class, we had dinner, and I was literally extremely quiet. I was just looking around. It felt like I was in a different dimension, looking from the outside in around everybody. And I'm like, is this what it feels like to meditate? And I've never stopped ever since.
Yeah.
It's
That's a
become such a
superpower, isn't
practice.
it?
It was insane. And of course, it's not something that I continued doing on my own. I continued using visualization techniques. I
Hmm.
was watching YouTube. I was listening to YouTube videos to meditate because I still couldn't do it on my own. I couldn't drop myself into the state without guidance. So I still today, I really enjoy guided meditation, though I can drop in much better by focusing on my breath just on my own. But guided meditation is super helpful, and there are so many resources out there.
I'll tell you, and for our audience, a tool that I regularly recommend is there's an app that you can get called Headspace. Headspace, the first 10 days are free. So you can try this for free. And I've worked with people who have never subscribed. They just keep doing the first 10 days, and it's excellent. Okay. Now, if you subscribe, we use it for, in our family, we use it a lot of different ways. So we have a subscription. So I really recommend that because you're exactly right. It's not about turning your brain off. The brain's, but it's about putting order. It's about putting order to the chaos. Yes, I completely agree with you. When it's done right, I'll tell you what's interesting is now just to throw a kind of a crazy vector in here, I grew up in a very evangelical Christian church. Okay. Very evangelical, like your feet got hot every Sunday because you were sure hell was coming through the floor. This was a Baptist brand of evangelical church, and you were in trouble. And I remember, so there's an event in the church that's called giving yourself to Christ. And they talk about being overwhelmed by the Spirit. Okay. I had that experience when I was 14 years old. Move on, move past. I move away from religiosity to more spiritualism. I tend to be a very spiritual person. I am not a religious person. And but what I've done when I practice meditation, I can duplicate the event that I had in church that day when I was 14 years old. I can feel something come over me. I can see the and it's just with deep meditation and working on that. So listen, there's a reason why these practices are in religion. There's a reason why they're there. And the other thing about this, listen, I think empathy is one of the most underrated human values we have. The lack of empathy is evil, in my book. Okay, if you have no empathy, you're evil. And
Psychopath.
there you go. Not to mention anybody by name. But as we work our way through this, when someone comes at you, another story. I'm walking through the airport in Philadelphia, worst airport in the world in my book. I'm walking through the airport trying to get to my next gate, and I see this guy, just waylaying orally, just screaming at this gate agent. The gate agent's eyes are gigantic. You can tell she's locked up. And I just simply walked up behind the guy for a minute, made sure everyone knew I was there. And then I just simply said, I took a breath because this could have gone either way. It could have been physical or not. And I said, sir, I said, I understand you're frustrated. I said, but right now, this person in front of you has no ability to fix your problem. Yelling at her will not make your day better, and it makes hers a lot worse. But just create just a little bit of bandwidth to understand this guy's obviously having a bad day. Something happened, and I get it's happened to me too. And it's hard. It's really hard. But that person that I'm dumping on doesn't have the ability to fix it. And listen, I'll be married 35 years this summer in June. If you don't think you don't have to develop those skills in the context of a relationship, you're kidding yourself. Okay. This is stuff that in a relationship you have to develop and use on a daily basis. But yeah, so this is when we go back and take a look, this creating just a little bit of bandwidth, a little bit of mental space so that when the challenge comes, you are parasympathetic or in flow, because I think flow is a co-engagement of sympathetic and parasympathetic. I think they're both there. But you boosted the parasympathetic so you can be in flow so your performance can be adequate. So just for what that's worth.
Yeah, practice really is important for any type of progress.
Critical.
You constantly have to do it. It's one of those things where coming from a acrobatic dancing background, I have to practice to be able to go down in a split. And it doesn't like I can't just go down if I don't do anything, any stretching for months out. I'm tight. It doesn't happen. It has to and it's the same thing with meditation. You constantly have to practice it in order for your brain to be able to tap into that calm state when
The
stress
skill,
occurs.
you're practicing the skill.
Yeah.
That's what's coming. Yes.
And you're also helping your brain age slower. I was reading a study that showed that at age 50, those who have meditated across their life had a 7.5 years younger brain than a control group, people who haven't meditated. And it continues to support their brain as it ages over time if you're allowing it to tap into those restorative brainwave states.
Mhm.
So it's very important in many different aspects of your life, not just stress management, but aging in relationships, in relation to the relationships you have in your life and the people you're interacting on a day to day basis. So, and with yourself, it really
Absolutely.
helps build that internal dialogue to be a lot more kind than for a lot of people who are dealing with that mental chatter that they just can't calm down or quiet down.
Yeah, I think that anger that you see is again a relationship to chaos. They're in a situation that they don't have any control. The only response is an anger response. And there's just very first of all, anger is rarely a good thing. And when I listen to parents and coaches talk to kids, say, you got to get out there and get mean. No, wrong answer. You've got to get a focus. You got to focus on your technique that when emotion comes into play, your performance will drop. And if I can get someone emotional, I win. It's like, I and you can use that as a strategy in athletics. You can use that as a strategy in negotiation. But yeah, once emotions come into play, you're at a disadvantage. So being able to control that's always important.
And there's one more little tool we wanted to bring up in this conversation that has been on podcasts, on news headlines, everywhere. This one supplement that has tons of research in it. It's very safe, supposedly. All the research are showing increasing amounts of benefits way beyond the gym, and it's creatine.
Hmm.
There is a new study that came out that showed that creatine supplementation, in addition to cognitive behavioral therapy, proved to be more beneficial for major depressive disorder than cognitive behavioral therapy alone. Now, there are limitations to the study that I read because there were a high dropout rate for those who were taking creatine. Maybe they didn't see the results, but even with those who did continue taking creatine, there was a significant increase in change in symptoms. However, again, the cognitive behavioral therapy sessions were one every other week, while a typical treatment plan is once a week or twice a week. So there are limitations to how the study was done, but it definitely shows promise in utilizing creatine, this supplement, to help mental health and help depression. And it's an area that creatine hasn't really been explored in much, but now it's given leg that there may be something to stand on here.
There's probably and again so let's for the audience, let's talk about what is creatine. So
Yeah.
creatine is really simple, just a little protein is all it is. Now, creatine in the muscle gets phosphorylated and it's stored, and think of it as a battery. It's the battery in your muscles. So if we're sitting here and a lion walks through the door and we have to sprint out of here to get away from the lion, that energy is largely going to come from your stored phosphocreatine. The energy system, we refer to it as ATP-PC. So you get ATP, so it's like a battery. It's there, but it's a small molecule and it's very effective neurally. So it has a lot of energy. So when you need energy for your nerves to work, creatine is a wonderful product. It crosses the blood-brain barrier. If I have someone that I'm concerned that perhaps has a concussion or risk of concussion, I absolutely keep creatine on board. That part of the problem with concussion is we try to the brain uses the most energy of any part of your body. About 25% of your body's energy goes through your brain. When you concuss it and it's inflamed, all of a sudden it doesn't like to use energy from oxidative or glycolytic sources. So it likes that battery constantly being there, that creatine supplementation. So That's what it's there for. Now you got to be careful with creatine is that because when your body stores creatine, it stores 3 moles of water for every mole of creatine. So people take creatine, they feel bigger, the scale, they get bigger. They think, oh, I've gained lean mass. Well, yes, at a technical definition, your lean mass is probably heavier. But what you're doing is you're storing more water with the creatine in your muscle. Some people will complain about feeling bloated, and this is real. But realize that when you're supplementing creatine, you're going to be storing more water with that. This was a if you're in a sport that has a weight cut that you're cutting weight for like wrestling or the light crew, there's weight, be careful with creatine because creatine binds the cellular water and can cause some health problems if you're cutting weight for that. But that's a whole nother story. But yeah, it's all creatine is. It's the same as stacking carbs. I mean, if you've got a marathon and you want to go eat a spaghetti dinner the night before, which it's a whole nother issue we can't talk about, but it's the same thing. It's a source of energy, but it's an immediate source of energy.
There are a lot of studies that are now indicating that there are metabolic, hormonal, and neurological benefits to supplementing with creatine. Now, the dosage is still mixed. Some people recommend that 3 to 5 grams a day. But the other day, I was listening to Rhonda Patrick's podcast where she was interviewing a person who was uh, touted to be a huge expert in creatine. And he says he takes about 10 grams a day, 20 if he travels across multiple time zones just to help his brain with jet lag, and then goes back to 10 grams. So it's very interesting how the dosage is mixed, and especially for women. I personally am not taking creatine, but the little voices in my head tell me I should, but they honestly everything is there. The research is there, and I just the only reason I'll be completely honest, the only reason I don't take creatine is because I will hold onto water, and I have taken creatine before, and just the water weight, I don't like it.
Have you ever experimented throughout your cycle, like turning it on and turning it off based on where you're at in your estrus cycle?
I have not, and it's a good recommendation. I
That
should
might be
do that.
something to start to think about.
I should do that.
Or use it strategically. Listen, if you've got an event coming up and a little bit of energy could be a beneficial, you know what? That's a great move.
Yeah.
Again, anytime you listen, there's benefits and there's risks to everything in life. There's a benefit to crossing the street, but there's a risk of getting run over as you go across. Um, so it's anytime that you're dealing with this, using things strategically can be really important. And again, it's part of your practice.
And for women, I was reading the study and it said that females naturally have a 70 to 80% lower creatine stores than
Mhm.
males. And it's increasingly more important as women enter that perimenopause, postmenopausal stage to help them maintain muscle mass, maintain healthy lean mass, and help with cognitive health down the
Yep.
road.
Creatine and hormones. Ladies, if you are premenopausal and you don't have a hormone test yet, get with your practitioner, get with your functional medicine, ask them for what's called a Dutch test. Get your hormone profile prior to menopause because having that after menopause will be gold. Okay, just be gold for HRT. Number one. Number two is yeah, that I mean, the downside on creatine is really, I had an Olympic athlete reach out to me, a Canadian Olympic athlete. Her mother was an athlete that I coached back in the day. She's now on the Canadian Olympic team in her sport. And they're like, what about creatine? I'm like, her event is really short, less than a minute. I'm like, oh, hell yes. But the challenge is you run into this is kind of the dogmatic side of sport. She has a dietitian or a sports dietitian that's saying, "Oh, you don't need to supplement. You can get it from natural sources." And I'm like, bunk on that. Effing supplement it and go out and whip someone's ass. That's kind of my way I approach it. But yeah, so it goes across the levels. There's a benefit, and I think you can assume it's safe. If you're going to go outside of recommendations, you need to think about that, work with a counselor on that, whether it's your doc or someone like that. Listen, Claudio, I mean, I'm twice as big as you are. physically. There's twice as much of me than there is of you. It makes sense that I would need twice as much creatine than you. I mean, so you've got to take those things into consideration.
You mentioned that there's very low risk. I mean, creatine has been one of the most studied supplement in the industry, and the risk to benefit
Ridiculous.
ratio has just been shown to be low for both males and females. So it's a safe supplement to try and see how your body respond because we're all bio individuals. So everybody's body is going to respond differently, both on a physical and mental level. So it's just an interesting way that you may hold on to water more than than the next person. I probably am the person who holds on to more water because that's how it works. But
Or you notice it more than most, I think is
yes,
maybe the way to state it. So I
that's
agree.
possible too. But all right, I wanted to wrap a little bit up and kind of summarize what we talked about and give a few snippets of recommendations to our listeners how they can work all of these things into their lives in a way that creates these 1% shifts toward reaching that 90% healthy state.
Hmm.
And I want to ask you, what are some of the one thing for each of the stuff that we talked about? Physical activity for stress resilience, mental practices for stress resilience, and supplements.
So listen, I found those papers on combat sports to be really interesting. I know as a father of a daughter who's concerned about her safety, largely not concerned about my daughter's safety. I mean, my daughter's 6'1", she'll throat punch you and just she's pretty
She's a
sharp.
badass.
She is her father's daughter, no doubt about that. But if you haven't done this, explore a martial art. It may be karate, maybe taekwondo, things like that. Again, I go back to females and fighting out of the guard. There is an answer there. You don't have to be held victim in that position. Follow some inner, I have two friends, Misha Tate, who is an MMA UFC world champion, and Vanessa Demopoulos, she's also a UFC fighter. They're both great girls. They're both very feminine. They're both amazing personalities, and they'll both choke your ass out. So don't be afraid. It doesn't make you less feminine to be safe. Number one. Number two, meditation. You know what? If you're not playing with it yet, you're leaving money on the table. If you want to start with Headspace. One of the tools that I really like, if you really want to get into mindful meditation and meditation feedback, there's a company out of California that's called Heart Math. Heart Math has a device called an Inner Balance, plugs into your phone, gamifies the process. I love that tool. I use it a lot. And it's HRV based, so it fits. And what's our third thing? Oh, supplementation. Listen, creatine is an easy answer. If particularly from cognitive performance, if you're postmenopausal, there's lots of reasons to roll this in. I'm consulting with an 18-year-old Canadian Olympic athlete that's doing it. Her mother could do it, her grandmother could do it, and all three of them would get benefit. So this seems easy to me.
So my turn. I want to start with in terms of the combat sports, I have never done any type of combat sports in terms of being on the mat fighting or rolling around, except when I would fight with my brother a little bit. But I have and always been a big fan of taking kickbox classes. And it may not be combat sports, but there's nothing that makes you feel more badass when you're crushing it at a kickbox class and you may be in air punching and air kicking, but still it has that feeling of strength and I can protect myself should anything were to ever happen. And so, if for those people, for those women who may be intimidated with getting down in the mat, which I am, then I think it's a good place to start to take some kickbox classes. You can find ones on YouTube or probably in
We've
your
got to
nearest gym.
find Claudia. Anybody in the Phoenix, Arizona area, if you're a female jiu-jitsu instructor, we've got to get Claudia out to roll around a little bit and just see what her experience is. I think that would be cool follow-up.
That would be cool. I would try it, but I've never considered it to be quite honest. But you keep saying that every woman should, and I know women who have done jujitsu and practice it, and they're dancers or they are gymnasts, so they're very feminine. But it's a sport that really gives you that competitive edge in terms of being able to defend yourself.
Yeah, just personal safety and confidence, and again, putting order in chaos. I mean, that's
Yeah.
what we're talking about.
And then meditation, my one tip would be again going to either like a Headspace app. I'm personally started with guided meditations on YouTube. So free, plug in your ear and just let the voice guide you through a meditation practice. And then I gradually graduated into using I'm a big fan of Brain Tap, this device that has certain particular lights in the earmuffs, and then it also has a light that flickers through your eyes, which through light and sound stimulates different brainwave activity. So it helps your brain get into those meditative states. So you're not just kind of doing it on your own, but you have a little bit of help through brain entrainment. So huge fan of those. And when it comes to supplements, creatine is not only well studied, but it's a very cost effective supplement.
Yes.
Very cost effective. So it will not break your bank. And I highly recommend just giving it a try. Try with 3 to 5 grams a day. See how you get on for a few
And it doesn't
weeks.
happen right away. You got to build it up, but yes, go with it for a few weeks and see what happens.
I think it takes, and I could be completely wrong here, but I think it takes about 30 days for it to saturate your
I think
system.
it depends. It's very individual.
Yeah,
But just know that it takes time. It's
it
not
takes
like
time.
you've got a headache, you take an aspirin. It doesn't work that way. It's got to build up in your system. They used to load it. They used to start with a loading dose for a period of time and then drop down. They don't even do that anymore. Just start with your 5 grams a day
Yeah. And go.
and go.
And that's it for today. We covered a lot, but I think there are a lot of takeaways from here. And if you have any questions, please be brave and comment us. Tell us what you're thinking about. Tell us if you have any questions, and we're more than happy to respond.
If you're watching this, do us a favor. Reach out because we're thinking about doing a live episode. We were talking about this the other day about doing a live episode. We want to, but we want to do something that fits what people are looking for. So please reach out, let us know what we could do, and we could do questions and answers and live like that. We want to continue to grow this. So thank you. So please subscribe, comment, follow. We really appreciate the fact that you listen at all, frankly.
Exactly. Thanks so much. And thanks, Don, for being
Have a
here.
great day.
Have a good one.
See
Bye.
everybody next week.